Well, looks like we are live. Hi everybody, welcome to another day of streaming. It's Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. So, yesterday we stumbled upon this very stupid error that I found out only happens in MSVC. I'm able to compile this in GCC, in Clang, or in Scriptin. All those are fine. And that sucks because this particular error is only in MSVC. So I'm like, what? That doesn't make any sense, right? It's like we have no syntax error here. This is literally just happening. So this is like a compiler error that we have no clue why it's happening. The syntax is fine, and the error it's giving me is some kind of parsing error down like here, which is like, what? That doesn't make sense. So, or sorry, it was covered right here. So it doesn't make any sense at all, and we're going to actually ignore it today and proceed with just writing or using like we're basically making a compensation for this. So essentially what we're doing is we're going to make a wrapper for all of these. That way we can use them without using them, if that makes sense. So like, we're just going to say that all these actually call, well, we already know that they called like very specific things like this. So we just have to translate all these into another function that we can call that doesn't have this funky syntax, and that MSVC will not complain because MSVC is being dumb. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. Additionally, we might be able to make some kind of like macro. Like the whole idea, the reason why all this started was because I had like a macro that had all this in there, right? And the idea was we would take the string and we would have that parsed within here or within the macro and then output that. Okay, so what we're going to do is I want to first try and make a macro where we like combine these. So again, we're going to be inserting this into some kind of macro. So let's just start with that. Can we make a macro define, oops, wait, oh, why is it down here? A macro called getFloat that accepts that string, like, the config var, and then simply adds an underscore f in front of it. We should be able to, right? Because all macros will do is just combine those strings together. It should theoretically be possible. Like we should be able to do var underscore f, and that will combine the two. So then I can say like, just as an example, like, does this parse outright? If we do get float, I don't know why I did that. Test. Is that legitimate? Expected a semicolon. Is that because they're not like next to each other? Okay. So they're not next to each other. So can we like get those to be next to each other? Like, we're looking for like some kind of like concatenation, right? Concatenation macros. So, is it possible to concatenate string 1, string 2? If they're both strings, you can just do define string 3, string 1, string 2. This then expands to str3, s1. And the C language separating two strings with space as in sm1 is exactly equivalent to having a single string s1. Well, okay, but that doesn't work for this operator. They do have to be next to each other. The white space does matter. So then my next question is, does the operator thing work if we do it like that in the actual Mac? Because that's what we had problems with, right? Is that we couldn't get this operator thing to work in there, which was the whole problem this whole time. Man, that sucks. At least I don't think there is a way, right? Like macro for string concatenation and hash operators. String in C, hash and hash are preprocessor operators in macros for token manipulation. The hash operator converts the argument into a string by enclosing it into double quotes. So it converts. I don't think that's really what we want. And my browser froze. Thanks. Geeks for geeks. Okay. token pasting operator. The hash operator in the macro concat AP is the token pasting operator. It concatenates two tokens into a single token. XY concatenates X and Y to form XY. So can I do like underscore F here? And this one I do like hash. So hash in front turns it into, or prints out, yeah, it does this, right? Converts the argument X into a string by enclosing it into double quotes. A preprocessor operator that causes the corresponding actual argument to be enclosed in double quotation marks. Okay, so in theory, right? If we combined, like, if we had something like this, and we did this and this, that should work, right? That technically would accomplish what we're looking for. But then it's like, why should I have to do that? Like, why can't I just then do... Okay, so this is just a concept, right? This is to get us to this point where we can use it like this versus having to use operator this. If we can get rid of that completely, then we can then make a macro that utilizes this and get us a step further. I kind of like that. That's not terrible, and we might be onto something. So what we would do is, originally we had a macro containing like this whole statement, right? So we would say like, we had this concept of getFloat being an entire macro that allowed us to determine if we grabbed like a variable from the monsters, for a monster or for a player based on just one name. So now we're gonna say like, I think we called it, originally we called it like config. So if we say config here, we want to pass in the variable name. So it would be like this. And by then calling, we would say is friendly. So the assumption is we have an E for our entity, I guess. Is that what we're looking for? I guess so. We have to identify whether it's friendly or not. So yes, that would be part of it. So it would look like something like this, where these two are vars. getFloat here wouldn't quite be what I'm looking for. It'd be like, what would we be doing here? We'd just be doing getFloat with this, right? So we pass in, well, we pass in var. And then we pass in the underscore F. Do I even need the underscore F part? Like, can I just do this? Right? Like, that makes more sense. Like, why do I even need this? Because, yeah, that's what it expands to. Wait. What? Wait, we don't need... That doesn't work, right? That's not... We need this, so I guess this isn't a requirement? Just the hash. Okay, go back. So that's effectively what I want. I want that to expand into this, and that's essentially going to call that function. Okay, good. So we're onto something. And then over here, we call this other one, which is fine. This would be var as well. So now we can take it one step further. Instead of having this getFloat macro, we just do... Well, we have to know if it's like... Okay, hold on. So we have to know if it's a float, right? So this is like config float. I think that's why I originally had like config F. I think I used F because I'm like, okay, that's why I used originally for float. Yes, and then in here I just hard code it. I just say hash underscore F. So that's one. And then here it's just getFloat. Okay, good. So that is the entire macro that we had before, essentially. And that should replace what we have for these two blocks. So then we can say config F around here, and then config F down here. Okay. And then where do I put this macro? We would say, it would be in like class, I think, or maybe config. I think it would go under class though. That would make more sense. We should have a header for that. Yeah, class.h. That's originally where we were gonna do all this stuff. So in here, oh, here we go. So we originally had like a capital config underscore I. Yay, my show's on! Hi, Plasticky. Welcome to the stream. Okay. Okay. So that's what we're doing now. So instead of this, we're gonna use the code from here now and essentially replace it that way. And then I just change these out and we should be good to go. Cool. That way I don't have to use the operator underscore F syntax and I think it won't be complaining anymore. Yeah. So it should be good. Hey, nice to see you again. Welcome, Ayush. Okay, well, this is complaining that's undefined. Oh, right, because we're using config, like capitals, underscore F, which I guess is fine. Do I take this one step further? Like, do I call this like, what if, in theory, we just redefine, maybe not redefine those operators, maybe do something like EF, which E could stand for entity, or entf. What if we took it one step further and made custom operators for this one too? Right? We're just continuing right where we left off yesterday. We're gonna be converting all the player actions into a split between having player-defined stuff and monster-defined stuff together. I think I like this concept of underscore EF. I think that's the play. So yeah, I think I want to take this one step further and just keep this custom string literal user-defined operator thing, and then we will use that instead. So let's go ahead and convert these now to be so they're going to return different things depending on what we get from here. So we're going to have operator string underscore and then whatever we're trying to define here. So we have EF, EI, and ES. And then inside we're going to accept the string itself. I think you can just accept the const char and it returns the other side. Because I remember that, like... Okay, so see how we have this? Oh, you know what? I think the compiler automatically deduces this. But we have to provide these as the arguments for it. So it's going to turn into something like this. But then now we have to know what the concept of an entity is in here. So we have to include, like, the entity header, which I guess is fine as long as it doesn't use class, which I don't think it does. And monster strategy. I think we're okay. So we're gonna try doing that and see what happens. Then these get converted to just... Okay, so now here's where the tricky part comes in, because now we would have to call operator here because we can't use like macro concatenation. So maybe that's the issue? But that makes things more painful. It might actually work today though. Like, maybe it works in here. Like, here's my hope, is that maybe it doesn't screw up inside of here and we actually make progress, right? Like, that's what I'm praying for. So key comma size in there, and then in here we pass in the key right there. I think it will accept. I hope it accepts. Yeah, it does. And these are length. And then we have to change... Okay, so then these become returns. This is going to return an integer. And this will return a string. So it's going to look like that. And then we don't know what E is, so... This is where it gets a little tricky, because the E is not actually going to be defined here. We'd have to pass that in too, but then it doesn't work. Like, I don't think you can have additional arguments. Maybe if we make our own custom function, but I don't really like this. Like, this to me is worse. This is a downgrade. I think I'd rather live with a little more typing and get the benefits of a macro here. And usually that's what happens when designing these things, right? We try out a few ideas and we're like, does this work? Does that not work? Right? And then we settle on something that we want to use. We have to create our own, like, what's it called? Like syntactic sugar. We want to decide which flavor of sugar we want to use for our syntax. So, and that will also actually work by coding it. So I think this is good. This is comfortable. There is another paradigm I kind of want to address real quick. You see up here how we have these, like, we have this. This is like, if it's friendly, we convert it to player, then do some things. If it's not friendly, then we do some other things, right? We have that paradigm in a couple places. This makes me want to, like, redesign this a little bit so that if it's more like a condition, and if it fails, it just doesn't do the code. So, like, what I'm thinking is that we say, like, instead of all this, we just say e dot for player, as in, like, we're saying for the player do this, for only for players. Then inside here, we create a little, like, lambda, or this becomes a macro. Like, either way works. And then we would put what we would want to do here. Like, so if it's for the player, we're under the assumption that we're going to get a player object to use inside of here. So then this becomes a macro. So it'd be like, it would provide like a player reference or a player pointer, like either one works. And that would turn into this. Like, that's what I'm thinking. And then you don't have to do like E2 player, you just have direct access to the player object. And you kind of go from there. So that's kind of what I'm thinking right now. Is like, would be like a better paradigm. I kind of wish I could just hide this though. Like, that's why I'm thinking this might be a macro. If it's just a macro, then we don't have to know about this like lambda itself. We can just write our code in here. So that's what I'm thinking. And I think this will just simplify things going further. It's like we have to establish what kind of rules we want for our syntax now in order to make this easy as possible for us. So that's what I am thinking. We will need that semicolon there. But if I add a lambda here, then I'm going to need some ending syntax. Which, I mean, it's like, usually I'm okay with. It's just like, it's just something I would have to remember, right? If I were to do something like this. So, do I want to go that route is the question. I think it would be easiest to just accept that we're going to have to put the lambda in here. I think so. So, it would look like this. But it would remove the if statement and already assign a variable for us to use. And then we can go a step further and maybe wrap this in a macro, and that might make more sense. So it'd be like, maybe it'd be like player, and it would look something like this. And then the player macro can have the rest of the syntax. So then player would look like this. Right? Like, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Also this, I don't know why this... Like, this part I wish I could hide. If I could, I would hide that. But it's just an idea. And maybe we could go like this, and then we can actually remove all this and just have it like this. Player end. That's what I'm thinking right now. Like, and we would do something similar, but for monster. Okay, well, let's try to add this for player function first. I'll try it out for a little bit and see how I like it, but I'm just trying to reduce a lot of this, like, if is friendly, convert to player, then do stuff. Like, I just want to have direct access to that. I think it'll be easier to code up the rest of this if I already have something like that, because it's going to get annoying to have to type those everywhere I go. So I think having this here is, like, better. Maybe even just, like, if player. That way it's a little more descriptive, right? If player... and then player end over here or something. Or end if. Maybe like end if would be even better. I think that makes more sense. Okay. So I like that. We don't have a 4-player function, so let's get on that. So the 4-player function needs a lambda. It's going to be public, and the function won't return anything. So it's just going to be 4-player. So it will accept a standard function. The function itself will be void. It will provide a player parameter or a player reference. And then we have a for monster, which is going to be similar, but for the monster class instead. Then with these two, we have to write the definitions of these. Okay. So for player, we're basically going to say if... Oh, you know what though? We're going to have to accept the entity itself. Which is why we had a macro up here. Because the macro... Well, no, we know what the entity is. We are the entity. Okay, so basically we're going to say if entity, which contains our pointer, it's going to be a... So first of all, we need to have the right thing, right? Like, we need to check if our entity is what it is. So we're going to check is entity or is a player pointer, then we can do something. So we're going to say run that function passing in our player. So this is func, and then we just call func with the player pointer dereferenced and passed in, and then we'll do the same for a monster. And then it just doesn't do no ops for anything that's not a player and not a monster respectively. And I think this is a good utility function to have, so we don't have to write as much stuff. And then we have to make our defines here to make this even easier. This will go inside of class right here. If player, let's say define end if, which will just contain the closing syntax that we might want. And then we make the same, but for if monster, we say for monster and accept a monster reference m. So now the question is, why doesn't this work? Oh, right, we have to introduce the lambda body now, so it would look like that. So let's see here. So that works. Perfect. Beautiful. So that's more or less what we're trying to do. And if we wanted to, we could also wrap it in our own, like, curly braces just for fun. It's literally up to us. That just puts in an inner scope. So I kind of like that. That's good. So we'll go ahead and do that. So everywhere where we see this pattern now, we just literally write the code of what we want to accomplish. And that's it. It does the rest. Okay, so that condenses a lot and will make things much easier for us. So now the moment of truth. Will this system compile, considering we're no longer using the, well, now we're using the exact _f__s's versus calling that like operator with blank strings. MSVC didn't like it for whatever reason. Maybe one day we'll figure out exactly why it doesn't accept it, but I did commit this earlier, so we have a point where we can someday go back to this and be like, so why didn't this work, if we ever wanted to. And just for reference, in case I ever do pull up this stream VOD and want to go back to it, that commit is... because I'm probably going to have to want to find it again one day, if this will load. It's under the Shadow Boss branch, if that will exist in the future, but more importantly, the commit ID is this, 98 Bravo 13568. So yeah. So now we just hope that this all compiles. Yay! I hope everybody's doing well. Goal for today is get some more of the player actions converted into a monster and player version. Oh. Wait, we still have this. This literally still pops up. Oh. Right, get rid. We don't use that anymore. Okay. I got scared. I'm like, Wait, we literally don't use that anymore. Why is it popping up? Like, dear God, please. Okay, and we're linking. And since we're linking, we are good to go. Woo! Okay, so once this finishes building, we're going to, we wrote some code yesterday inside the warrior and thief. I might have to also delete the game pack because it's got to load new asset resources. So I might as well do that now. And we wrote some code that basically said if it gets within 100 distance of the player, it will use the right-click ability as a monster and set its defensive cooldown to whatever we set here, which I believe is 10 seconds? 15 seconds. Yes. So, we're gonna try that real quick and see what happens. We put it in the, like, actually, I don't remember. I think we put in the Pirate Captain boss map, so I have to go there if I can remember it. And we'll give it a shot real quick. Oh yeah, also, yesterday, we found out that the Mscripton build, for some reason, if it tries to load a new map cache, it literally breaks. So that is a task. I added it under our issue tracker. One day we're going to have to visit that and fix that, because for some reason it doesn't work. In theory, what should be happening is we don't have to cache anything when we make the Mscripton build. We just provide the entire cache in the asset pack to begin with. Like, when we release the game, ideally the user shouldn't be waiting for a map to, like, reload or whatever. Where is this thing? Is it here? Okay, cool. So this is what we're looking for. And let's just get him to spawn, and I don't think he walks towards us, so we have to walk towards them. And so, technically, when we get within 100 range of it, it should use it. And I can't tell if it used it or not. It doesn't look like it did, because we do not see an animation change. I think it's supposed to animation change, right? So let's just start by seeing if this is running. Okay, this is not running. Why is this not running? Oh, we never changed the phase. It's literally on this phase. Oops. Oopsies. Okay. Simple fix though. Why is this open? This doesn't need to be here. Go away. Okay, that keeps popping up every time I close it. Set phase to run. Try that again. Then hopefully that will work, right? It is the hope. So it will actually run the code we wrote now. Because it will actually be in the run phase. Or it crashes, that's very fair. I wonder what it crashes on. So we're under get float error log. Let's look at that first. Why are you over here? Let's put you right here. Try to read non-existent float property warrior.rightclick ability.cooldown 0. Warrior.rightclick ability.cooldown array element 0, which it is there. Let's take a look at how it's read real quick. Maybe it calls, if it's using get property, that would be why. That I forgot about that part. That's a why. Can I just... is this like pinned or something? Auto hide. I don't know why that keeps popping up. It is getting really annoying. Okay. So, the issue is, I think we're calling config float, right? Which, we do that normally, that's fine, but guess what? It uses get property, and guess what? It's a dot property, so it parses it. So we need to modify these things to have another, like... So normally we would want that. That's very much what we would prefer. In this scenario, we are trying to parse it directly, so this needs to be literal. So how do we make it literal? That's gonna be annoying. It's more like maybe I provide another parameter and then pass that into here, which is a toggle for whether or not it is a literal statement, and then make... I guess that's how we're gonna have to do it. Essentially, we're gonna have to decide in here whether or not this is, like, literal or not. So, let's make a new enum. We'll just call it literal. And we're just gonna say whether or not it's going to literally interpret. By default, we're gonna say it's, oh wait, literal equals interpret dots, but the other one will not interpret dots. No, it's not a type error, it's how we utilize this. So the get property function for my configuration system allows us to drill into objects using the dot property. So for example, under the warrior class file, if we want to get to like the cooldown of the right click ability, we literally do warrior, that's the base object, so warrior dot right click ability dot cooldown. Normally that's how we would access it. You can see they're like nested objects. Inside of the monster file though, we're just gonna do it like this, but because we use the dots here, it thinks this is a separate strategy. Now another thing I could do is just literally don't use dots, right? I could just say, I could just use literally anything else. I could use like these, I could use commas, I could use anything, I could use colons, apostrophes, anything else to do it, which would be easier. I wouldn't have to change any code. So I'm considering that, or the other option is I pass in another parameter here that says whether or not to literally interpret the dots, and instead of calling get property, use this syntax instead. Because this syntax will parse it, the parameter literally, it will not interpret the dots, versus get property will parse the dots. So I have to make something that will either tell get property not to parse it by passing something in there, or make another if statement out here that chooses whether or not to do this or get property. So I have to make a couple of design decisions right now of how I want to implement this. Workaround by using a different symbol, or redo code. I think for this, we might not like really... This feature won't really get used often, so it might not even be worth redoing all this code. There is a lot of configuration getters to do this on, so it might not really be worth to do that. It's not really much though, we would just have to modify all these, but still, it's like, do I need this feature in the future? That's always the question to ask when re-architecturing code, right? Like, will I need this in the future? Is it good to have this on hand? It might be. It might be. I think I want to incorporate it to like future-proof it in case I want to use this syntax elsewhere. Plus then it's more clear that like, hey, why did I choose like apostrophes instead of dots or something? Like, this to me would be nice. But then again, I'm thinking back to what I have to write here now. I have to write something that says like, okay, this is like literal. Like, I'm gonna have to include this every time, and the whole point of this was to avoid adding more syntax. If anything, I would argue that the syntax should be part of the tag. Like, maybe we put like literal or something, like an underscore L in front of it. There's so many ways to go about this. I mean, is it really that bad to do something like this? Or I'll do you one better. What if we just put spaces? Like, according to English, this actually makes sense. Why not use spaces as the separators? Then we don't have to do anything. I think I kind of like that, actually. That's actually fun. What got you into programming? When I was a kid, I was very much intrigued by how the SNES and the NES, like, displayed stuff on a television screen, like how like objects moved, how interactive video games were. And so that got me wanting to try and make my own game. So at that time we had dial-up, and only dial-up. So I loaded up, I connected to the internet on my Windows 95 grandparents' computer, and I looked for something to make games with, and I found this program called Game Maker. Game Maker at that time was on version 5.1, or 5.1 alpha. I specifically remember that version. So it looked like, oh shoot, this isn't, what the heck? That is not the search result I expected at all. See more anyway. What? Is this okay? Is Google okay right now? This is not anything about what... I'm so confused. What just happened? Anyway, sorry. Yeah, I'm just shocked by what this search result... This is awful. What? What is this search? Anyways, yeah, so I found GameMaker 5.1, I downloaded it, and then I started making like little games with it, and I just kind of got sucked in. And after I got sucked in, thank you, this actually is what I was hoping for. So yeah, GameMaker 5.1, or maybe it was 5.3, maybe that's why I couldn't find it. It was probably GameMaker 5.3 alpha. And everything kind of took off from there. GameMaker taught me with its like drag and drop system how to program essentially. Here we go. So it was 5.3 alpha. I just searched the wrong thing. It used to look like that. And then, yeah, I just made like little basic things all the time. I have tons of like old projects. I even have a Windows 98 computer in the back that I booted up and ran all these old games on. I literally got GameMaker 5.3 alpha on it, and I ran some of my old files. It was very nostalgic and very silly, but it was a lot of fun. And then from there I went into like Pygame. One of the games I played called BZ Flag, like I got into that, like really into it, and I was like making maps for it and like little like plugins in C++. Oh god, my C++ was awful back then. And I was given like a Linux server, so I got to experiment with Linux, and eventually I learned, oh, with the Linux server I can even host websites. So like I got like Drupal and like WordPress and a bunch of other, and like PHP BB, and just experimented with like how all those worked and setting up databases, administrating a server. It was a lot of fun. Eventually I wanted to do game dev like more simply, because I tried like Unity. I'm like, I really don't like this. So I looked for a very simple engine, or in this case a framework called OLC Pixel Game Engine. I ended up finding that online out of the hundreds of recommendations, and I went with it. And it's kind of like Raylib, but it's for C++. It provides a little framework for you to put things on screen, and you kind of just build your own systems from that, and it all expands from there. It's pretty awesome. Spaces are good choices. Wait, it got retracted. Okay, never mind. The comment died. Okay, anyway, so yeah, I'm thinking we have a type here called literal. We treat it as an enum, but it's really going to be interpreted as like true or false. So I think this is the way to go. We can incorporate into all these get functions, pass them into get property, and it will do the work for us. So because OLC util data file needs to know about this, we're going to edit our data file class, which we usually don't do. This is very much a key system file or engine file. But yes, spaces are a good choice. If it doesn't impact the rest of the code, given that you use it in multiple places, it makes sense to use spaces. Yeah, I think so. Having a physical Windows 98 machine running is so damn cool. Yeah, it really is. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, very, very nostalgic. And then I have like C++ like 5 on it or something. It's just something really old. And I'm like trying to use it. I'm like, this is bad. It had like none of the features that even like C++ 11 had. Which you think of C++ 11 and you think that's pretty like old nowadays. Like that's like the basics. So that's pretty wild. Like at the very least, like up to 14 would be nice. Okay, so we're making an enum called literal. It's gonna have an item called interpret dots and just literal. So interpret dots will be the false version, and then literal will be true. I'm just gonna forcibly set these to be that way. And we're gonna have it take on the underlying type of a boolean. I think that's fine. Why is it complaining? This isn't a namespace. Enum, I think it's just IntelliSense not catching up. This looks fine. There's nothing wrong with this. So we're gonna go back in to class.h. Move it over here for a little bit. And let's go ahead and, oh no, config.h, actually. We're gonna have to change these now. Or do we? Wait, am I saying I don't have to do this? I'm saying it would be a good feature, but I just changed these to spaces, right? So I don't have to do that? Yeah, I don't have to do this now. Okay, never mind. I had like so many thoughts in my head, including the game maker thing. But yeah, that's pretty much how I got started with programming, and it's been a lot of fun. But I can thank my now 23 years of programming experience and development from being curious about those kinds of things as a child. And another thing that motivated me to actually get Game Maker was I was like, I could sit here downloading like computer games, and it would take like hours to download a 3 megabyte like game back then. And that was for like a small game, right? That's not even a larger game. And I'm like, well, as a kid, I'm like, what if instead of waiting 3 hours to download a little toy game, why don't I just download a program that lets me make games? Then I will have infinite amounts of games because I won't have to wait for games. I can just make games. So that was like my logic as a little kid. And so that's what I did. And those 3 hours were worth every second. It changed my entire life. Okay, so where did I make the other changes? Right here? No. Oh, they're in Adventures in Lestoria, that's right. So these, no, I'm looking at the wrong place. I'm looking in these macros, which are in Monster Strategy. That's what it was. Okay, I think I fixed all that. So we're just using spaces. Okay, rebuild. I had a bunch of thoughts, like when designing how I want my code to look, like syntax-wise and stuff. A lot goes through my head because it's very important. I'm making a decision that's going to impact the rest of my code base. Like, deciding I'm going to do like this is not an easy decision because now I have to commit to that bit. So, just in general, every time we have to make an architectural design decision on a code base, I have to really spend some time thinking about all the possibilities. Are there going to be any pain points to this? See if I can address them. Are there any alternatives, right? Choosing the best path. And a path that's comfortable. Like, we've literally implemented 2 new, like, structural designs into our code base now. So we're pretty much required to use them now. In the meantime, knowing that this probably works now, that I've got the right variable, we can start looking at how to fix a battle cry. So I put this here as a temporary, like all these have to do. So basically I'm just forcing our code to pretend these are all player instances. But essentially we would start changing all these. So firstly, battle cry emits an effect that just like, it's like the battle cry like roar little ring effect. And so we have these variables that we can add to our monster to determine how large or small these effects will be. So we're going to convert these first to be like, to use the config f and config, it looks like they're all config f actually. I mean, float is the most commonly used variable type. So we just use that instead of the underscore f. Okay, so we have this. Let's just try it real quick. Today's gonna be kind of a short coding session. Started a little late, but that's fine. Okay. Okay, so we got within range and it still crashed, so let's find out why. It still did the dot properties, which is not right. I did remove them, right? Yeah, they're gone. What? Did I not save the, like, it should have rebuilt this file. That's odd. Did I change? I changed in here, right? Yeah, I removed the spaces. What's going on? Did it say warrior plus thief with the space? Hold on. Let me make sure I didn't typo that. So monsters.txt. Okay, warrior plus thief is one word. Warrior plus thief strategy is one word. Otherwise, that would have not worked in the first place. Everything looks right. So... what gives? Okay, we might just look at a little further back in the call stack, see what happened, right? Because clearly that's not... we're not trying to do warrior.rightClickability.duration anymore. So let's jump back 1 or 2 frames here. So... block time... oh, because it gets called in here. Wait, so I'm gonna have to change it for the player then. Because the player has to match. So this doesn't actually work. So config F here is under the assumption that we are going to interpret these literally instead of drilling in. But that doesn't really make sense either. But it would only do it literally for monsters. Okay. Alright, new idea. New idea. Okay. Let's actually change the entire behavior of our config file system. So here's the new logic. If there is a key that exists that matches the name, it's going to use that variable first, before doing any drilling down. So like before looking inside of here to specifically find like warrior.rightClickability.cooldown, before it even interprets that literally, first it just sees if there is a key that literally matches. Then we don't need any of that like literal enum stuff. I think we're just going to change the property of getBehavior to match what we're trying to accomplish. I'm trying to think if there'd be any edge case where we would not want this behavior. I think one that might... if we're using dots, it's more than likely we're drilling into an object anyway. And if we're not using dots, it's very likely just a property by itself. So I don't think we run into any conflicts, as this is the very first time we are accomplishing this. In most cases, we want to parse it anyways, and we have been. So let's just do that first. We're going to say, before we do anything else, we're going to say last access property equals our current, it's just name, right? And if we have the property name just straight off the bat, then return it. Simple, we're done. Don't have to do it, nothing fancy to do in here. Then we do .getProperty of, wait, why do we even need that? We just pass it. Just pass it literally. Wait, does this need something? Oh, getProperty based on name as well. I'm confused why there are 2 of these. So operator this requires a name, gives us a data file object. Then we do .getProperty on it. Oh, hold on. I see. So we just literally return... we should just be able to return that. I think IntelliSense was just being slow. Yeah, that's all we have to do. And then we're done. Alright, let's go ahead and try that. That should fix everything. So config is going to provide the initial data rather than going within the object. So the way I designed this, I kind of took a shortcut when I designed this, but basically I made it so the player already has this property, but it's like inside of a structure. It's like all inside these objects. So if we went into warrior, then into right clickability, then into cooldown, we end up here. And that's correct. That's for a player. But for a monster doesn't have that. So under normal circumstances, it would be looking for that inside of here, but clearly we don't have like that structure. We don't have warrior, right clickability, so on and so forth. We don't have that structure inside of here. So it's looking for that and not finding it. Because that's literally what get property does, is it splits by dots, and then it drills into that get property. So this becomes a recursive function, right? It's like get property split by first dot, use that as the new property, and then get property again, going further and further. It's just recursive until it's parsed all the dots. So if instead the full name matches an actual property in here, so we just literally read this whole thing and say, okay, is that in the file? Then we use that instead, and we won't start drilling down. So it's just an extra step. And that's technically what we need, and makes it so we have no friction. It accomplishes all the use cases we would like. So instead of trying to work around it, I've decided, work around it and add a bunch of extra code or if statements around things I don't really want. I just adjusted the actual behavior of getProperty. Okay, now this is where it gets interesting. Because now it's complaining about something trying to read a config item, so it's like, okay, well, clearly doing this messes something up. I'm trying to think why. I guess it's because, yes, we do have a property that is on the higher level called interface. So if there's like an inner item called interface and an outer level called interface, they would then clash and I would get the wrong property, resulting in this failing. So it's more like we only do this behavior if there are dots in it. If there aren't dots in it, we don't care. We're just assuming it's the direct item. But if there are dots in it, we do care. So let's say if name dot find a dot is not equal to and pause, then we care to actually do this. What happened? Oh. Yes. So if we do find a dot, then we will use this methodology. We will try to, at least. But if it doesn't have a dot, we're not going to match it because it would then match to an outer level item, which would not be what we want. That would be dangerous. I think that will fix everything. So those two are for, yeah, so one is for a player and one is for a monster. I've decided, like, the whole idea behind us doing, like, all of this in the first place is I have every behavior related to players and monsters inside one place, and I can just see it all at a glance rather than splitting it up. So I've made this macro in an attempt to consolidate both monsters and players. That was the goal. And hopefully, yeah, like, I'm trying to prevent it from drilling into the object, because if it drills into the object, then we're gonna have problems because it doesn't exist. Like, this is supposed to be the key, but I'm thinking we might have to just... There might have to be another way we have to do this. Like, I'm thinking maybe the key is we go in here, and if it's for a monster, like, just thinking out loud right now, instead of passing in this key directly, maybe we do like a find and replace. Like, replace all the dots with something else. And then we can go in here, but that's just more like hidden behavior that we now have to account for. So that could be dangerous too. There's a lot of things I've been thinking about for this. Like, this is complicated. And either way, we're gonna have to change something about how we do all this to make it match. So yeah. And this still happens. Okay, this is a little weird. I'm gonna find out if this is caused by what we're working on right now or something else. So we're on line 170 during initialization. Oh, this is like... Oh no. Okay, hold on. We're in release build, so we really can't see what's going on here. So we're gonna rebuild in debug and try this again. Plus, it would be a good idea to step line by line through this and figure out why this doesn't do what I need it to do. Like, I'm just trying to look at it now and think, like, okay, so if we find a dot, then check if that property with all the dots just exists. But now that I think about it, it technically doesn't. Well, it might. There's a lot going on here. I have to really like sit down and think about this. It's complicated. We've been dealing with a lot of like restructuring and complicated stuff in our game engine recently, which is fine. Like when we have to change how our game engine works, naturally we're gonna have to really dig in and mess with things. So it's very natural. As long as we debug it and take our time, we should be okay though. These things are not simple usually, which is an unfortunate effect of, you know, having a very large project is you're gonna have to deal with this stuff, and you just have to be patient. And I have to be patient with the compiler because C++ has long compile times. At least with the way we use it, because we have so many files, we have so many templates, right? Okay, so now we're in debug mode, so we're gonna get a lot more like information here. So let's start back again in here. So we're trying to initialize this value. This is called interface.vignetColor, and it's calling the underscore pixel function. So we said that if it has a dot, try to find this literally, right? Which is like, okay. So has property has to return true in order for that to even occur. So my assumption is when it went into here, so this is probably where we're going to start by stepping through, right? We're going to start from where we tried to load that value and go from there. So I'm just going to breakpoint there and restart the program. So are the dots providing the property by drilling down into the object? Yes, exactly. So like, for example, this, it's expecting an outer object called interface, and then inside interface is a vignette color property. So if we go look at our interface.txt, you can see there's an outer object here called interface, and then we have a curly brace, open curly brace, indicating these are properties inside of interface. And then right here would be the vignette color. It's trying to read this property right here. So that's what that string is supposed to indicate. So we're at this line inside our debugger. I'm going to go ahead and step into there, which is going to lead to here. We're not interested in this, but we will go into the get property function. So here we are. We can see the name is indeed interface.vignetColor, so it does have a dot. This is hopefully not happening. And then we're just going to set it. So we're going to first see if there's a dot, which that should return an index. So I go ahead and let that pass. So, oh, it ran has property first. So it says has property returned true. That must mean has property interprets dots as well. Oh, damn. Indeed, it has that same code. So it thinks this property exists, which it does in theory. But now we're going to say, okay, well, if we have the dot... Okay, so we have to think of this differently then. We're not supposed to do this. We're supposed to do like, see if this object has that key. Like, that's not what we're trying to accomplish, right? So we only do like the innermost level of has property without actually parsing these dots. That's the only way we're gonna know. So that's annoying, right? So instead, we're just gonna return this right here. If mmapObjects.count is greater than 0 for that particular name. So that's essentially what we would have to do instead of has property. This is essentially the has property check, but without drilling down and parsing the dots. So we're going to say if we find we have dots and we find we have a key that matches that, then we return here. So now it's not going to parse that. I'm going to try running it again. It should now at least get further. Once, oh, I didn't remove the breakpoint, did I? Well, it'll pop up again. Oh, it has to do a full recompile because we modified the data file header. Like I said, it's deeply integrated in basically all of our system stuff. So maybe I'll pull up the breakpoints window while we're here and just... Oh, I can just hit disable all breakpoints. Cool. So far, so good. After this... I do want to try and make some actual progress on warrior.cpp. We just have to get everything set up right. Once everything is set up, we're pretty much good to go. But yeah, my project takes like 4 minutes to compile now, so every time we make a change that affects, like, anytime we make any header change that isn't a major header file, this is basically what we have to wait for every time now, which is really annoying. I'm starting to think, like, this costs a lot of time throughout the day. If I make another game project that is this large, I want to spend a lot of time working on either compiler time optimization, or maybe just choose a language that doesn't have the... As much as I've enjoyed using C++, this is one of my biggest... This is starting to become like a friction point, right? For development. It's like, I have to literally wait here to make any major change to my game every time and see the result. And I could just code more stuff and compile it all at once, but like, I really don't like that. I want a fast iteration time. That's when you're making games, like, it's a creative process. You have to be recompiling and seeing your results over and over. It should not, like, this should not be a thing. Like, when I'm reconsidering my next game project, I'm actually going to consider if I even want to use C++. Because this is, like, a big friction point for me. You can see that that intro screen takes so long on debug mode. But yeah. So, let's just see if it works. So, everything else looks good so far, so that's good. It seems like I'm constantly... I mean, that's a good thing. Like, when we're waiting for compiles, like, I really don't mind just chatting. Like, that's part of the fun, right? It's part of why I stream, is just, like, having other coders to chat with while doing my own stuff. That's always fun. So we still crash, so this is our next part to debug. Hopefully we get something useful out of this. So, it looks like we are here. So, again, trying to read non-existent property. Let me go in here, actually. So we were trying to get here, right? So that still occurs. Let's back up to right here. Okay. Warrior space... Oh wait, I fixed this. So now I have to undo the fix. Yes, I have to undo the fix now that I've changed it yet again. It's like, in the AI code, I'm looking for this, but then in the other error was when it got to here. Funny enough. So either way, this and has to match as well as this. It's kind of funny. Luckily, changing this is just a CPP file. It's just one recompile, file recompile, so no big deal. So yes, it didn't even go in here this time. It just couldn't even find that option. But it looks like that code got us to the behavior we wanted. If there is a dot property and there happens to be a key with those dots inside of that configuration item, it will use that configuration item, which is nice. But we haven't had any other keys that use dots, so in my head, logically, that means that code should not have caused anything else to not load correctly. Because the requirement is it has to have a dot in it, or it won't even bother. And luckily that logic works, because the alternatives would have been messy. We would have had to change a lot of internal stuff. And I was really trying to avoid that. Okay. Alright, so something else now. So, one step closer, maybe. Okay, same error. Okay, we're still in here. Warrior dot, because I did change it to dots, right? Like, that's, yes, that's what it should be. So it should know that it's in here. So I guess we're gonna do some stepping to find out what it's doing now. So I'm gonna breakpoint here. Restart, and we're gonna try it again. I really should have this guy over here, and it should be showing the debug log. There we go. Just so we're like, we actually know what's going on, because debug mode is slow, so it's like everything takes some time to load up. But yeah, very chill coding day due to us just like spending time. Like, there are days where we throw down a lot of code. There are also days where we're debugging code, right? So it's like we get a little bit of variety every time we stream. Okay, so let's see here. Parameter is correct. I'm gonna keep that open, and then make sure index is 0. It is. So it's not an NPC, first of all. It is a monster, and it's gonna check if it has that property. So, oh, this is actually gonna fail. That's annoying. Because, no, it doesn't have that property, because you have to go into, like, monster, warrior plus thief, warrior dot, like, it's not gonna find that, because it's gonna interpret all the dots. So these has properties are gonna fail, and that's why we get here. So it doesn't even try right now. So has property also needs to return correctly if we have dots and we have a key that matches on the base level. So we have to do the same thing, where we have to say, okay, if we do have dots... Oh, you know what? I guess we could have checked X here. That's probably what we could have done on the other one. So if X is not equal to... So if it has dots, before we even bother with all this, first just see if this is true. Because if it is, then we actually do have a property that matches on the outside. So then we can just return it, or return true here, saying that it does exist. So we actually have the same issue on that side. So instead of doing this, I'm actually going to do... I'm going to move the logic into here and just put, okay, if this matches, which is now also has property, so now we can say has property, but it's not an inner object now. So we still have to do kind of like this. Yeah, so now we say if has property, but on the dot name instead. And if it does, we only return the outer object. Okay, so that is correct. Also, we have to adjust this last access property thing for debugging purposes. And that makes this correct. Okay. I think we're good now. What a pain. So again, full rebuild. So with dots, config property key gets checked instead of drilling into object. So the new logic is if there are dots, before we assume we have to drill down into an object, we actually check if there is a key with those dots in it. So like we just said, like if the name is warrior.rightclickability.cooldown, first see if inside whatever object we're in, does that key already exist? If it does, don't drill down. If it doesn't, assume that we have to drill down somewhere to reach it. So we're adding like another layer to the logic. So that's essentially what we've accomplished here, is we're saying, okay, if it has a dot, before drilling down, see if that property exists in full with dots just on the outside. If it does, return it as is. Read the property as is. Do not drill down. Otherwise, it still has dots, but actually interpret the dots and drill into the object, which is where the recursion for this thing begins. So that logic should check out. Great. It's a little complicated, but it's the behavior we have decided to go with. Cool. Where's my game? Oh, it actually failed. So it's actually failed here on trying to read interface.vignette color, but as the full property, even though we changed it? Okay, well, I guess we're gonna have to look at how that works. That's interesting. Okay. Let's go ahead and check that out. So we're back to the original issue where inside of here, we're trying to initialize the vignette color. So we should hit that breakpoint, and then we'll end up inside of get property, which then we're saying, okay, has dots. So we're going to end up in here, and then we're going to see if it has that property with the dots included, which, okay. So it's looking for this full property, like interface.vignette color. Map objects. What kind of objects does it have? Well, it has a lot of objects, but interface.vignette color should not be part of it. So count should be returning 0 here. Like we can see all these objects, these are keys leading into further objects. None of them are called interface.vignette color, like we can just see. So that should be returning false. And indeed it did, because we just stepped out of it to the next line. So it's now here where it's supposed to parse just that next property. So interface. So this is working correctly. My question is, why does it not keep going properly from here? Well, this is recursive, so now it's going to go into the next get property call, which is just interface by itself, which should exist. So it should go straight down to here and drill down into the interface object. So that's good. Our stack should now go back to the has property call right here. So we're back in has property, and since that returned, it's now going to check if it has that property using sname substring x+1. X is holding the position of the first dot, which is 9. So that should be starting at position 10 of this name, which is after interface dot. So the next item should be vignette color. So it's now going to call has property on vignette color, which indeed it does. Oh, I like this. I think I enabled this recently by accident. There's like the debugger like internally shows like this property without me having to mouse over it, which is kind of cool. So this doesn't have a dot, so this should fail, and it should immediately go to map objects. Now vignette color should be in here, which indeed it is, so this should return true, which it does. We can see that's going to be the return value. So this should return true, which means has property is true. So we originally called get property. This is like, now we're back to the top, which means it has successfully obtained... Oh, wait a second. This is on the inner with the interface.vignette color. Wait a second. So we drilled into it. Oh, shoot. So when this is false, we need to return false. I see. So we let the logic slip. If it has dots... Hold on. Okay, I have to think more about this. So if it has dots, if it finds this, it returns true. If it doesn't find it, it will keep going and realize that it does have that property by drilling further down. Which is not what we want. What we want is... So in other words, again, we can't use has property here. We still need to use this guy. This is a pain. So I need to think of the other case. Because has property will return... Okay. Let me set this breakpoint to only occur when that other breakpoint occurs. So only enable when this breakpoint's hit. Okay. That way we don't go into here again. Okay, so let me get to this breakpoint a second time. Oh, okay, never mind. That doesn't happen because it only triggers once. So we're gonna be back here, and then we go here, and then let's get back to where we were, where we called has property. So we're just seeing if interface.vignette color, if that has that property. So we're like, okay. So think about it. It doesn't. So that means we have to like drill down and continue. So we shouldn't be doing has property here because this is just like the initial check, essentially. But if it did have dots, we should check. Like, so we use has property in order to determine whether or not like the key exists on the outside. But in here, but it has more behavior. It like, if it doesn't, then it keeps going to find out if it has the property further down. And the property further down is the drilled in property. So it's like we need to separate whether or not we're looking at like there's some behavior we have to express here in order to make sure our logic does what it's supposed to do. And that's tricky. Let me go back here real quick. Or excuse me, let me go back here real quick. So in this instance, we're trying to say we want to find this, and if it does exist, we want to just return it that way. But what happens when we do config float here? Because I know this calls has property, right? So what happens when it does this is this also needs to be able to return that statement. So then what happens when this doesn't exist? Like now let's look at the opposite scenario, the interface.vignette color. Well, first of all, we're not even using this function. We're just calling it directly. We're just saying, okay, get that property. Like in here, or in here, it's literally just calling underscore pixel. Underscore pixel does get property directly. So it doesn't call has property, which means interface.vignette color is directly passed into here and saying, okay, check for specifically that that full thing exists. But then we run into that other problem, right? Where like has property should be able to return if this is true, but at the same time. So I think the issue was I changed both of these assuming that I was checking the same thing, but really I wasn't. And I think this resolves that. Oops. Let's actually put that there. And I think this will resolve that. Fixed it? Yes. So in the case of dots, the key for property is taken directly if available, else it drills down. Correct. On a high level, that is exactly what we're trying to accomplish. So the issue was, like, has property was returning true for a drilled in property. Like, we used has property to check for a drilled or a not drilled in property down here, and it returns true because yes, interface.vignette color, when parsed, returns that it does indeed have it. So has property essentially accounts for both scenarios, so we have to be careful that has property doesn't return true here for a statement that that doesn't exist, if that makes sense. So like in that scenario, the reason why I was returning true here was because even though this doesn't exist as a whole, like with the dot, this item when drilled down does, which it followed that logic here when it failed the first time. So this part should load. I'm not gonna go into that anymore. So we're gonna get to the point where we're in here, and hopefully this now does the right thing, because now has property will return true the first time we call it, before we load it, and then when we do load it, it's not going to load the wrong thing. So both things have to apply still. And then with that out of the way, should be good. And then I think we got a call here for today, because we're gonna be out of time. But yes. But yeah, a fun little, like, logic puzzle today. This is why I enjoy coding, like, just solving and figuring out problems, right? That's part of the fun of programming and why I enjoy it so much. And when we get to do stuff like this, that's really where programming shines. I know it seems like, yeah, it's just like we're debugging all day and not actually making progress, but like, that to me is the fun part of programming, is like solving problems, right? Okay, so we're here at this breakpoint. I'm just gonna let it go. And this time, it actually grabbed the value. So we can actually see that value inside our watches. We can see get float, return 15. So defensive cooldown is indeed populated, thankfully. So now we get to go and run this action. But we'll see in here, well, nothing still happened, but apparently these two things ran. So I guess my next question is does this thing have like a shield now, is my next question. So I'm actually at a breakpoint when we get here, and I want to see if this, like, if we go into it, is it applying anything else for the monster? Like, the logic inside here is fine, because after 15 seconds, it should run it again, assuming we're still in range. So I'm actually gonna go into action now, and let's just see here. So we're in here. Oh, we definitely don't want to do this. That it's setting the cooldown timer of the player's defensive spell, which is hilarious. So we definitely need to fix that. Okay, block time. Wait. Not friendly and... yeah, okay, that's fine. So block time is 3 seconds, and it should have read it from the monster's block time instead of the player's. So, entities do not, or monsters do not have enchants, so we get to skip those two. We go down to here. Block timer is currently 0, and then we modify it, right? So we just set block timer equal to block time. So in theory, that should have adjusted the monsters. It should have added a block slowdown buff on top of... Okay, so if we look at entity, it's currently holding a monster. So right now, we should see that it has a buff. So if we go to the buff structure, do we see that? So there's the block timer. Indeed, that got changed correctly. And then where's the buffs? Buffs. Are you in here? There it is. Buff list is now a size of 1. And it will last for 3 seconds. Or... yeah, it'll last for 3 seconds. Cool. Okay, and it's 30% slowdown. I don't know if it's actually applied to monsters yet. That's gonna be another thing to check. So has property will get both drilled in property value and the available config value, but it's supposed to get it from config to return true or false for its available in config for the key of property. So yes, that is correct. That was the problem, was when we were calling get property, it was like, okay, so has property was false, it just, so what happens after, right? Well, now it assumes that it's not trying to read the whole dot, so it drills down further to see if the individual items are there, which is true. They are down there when you actually parse the dot. So has property, looking for the dot fully, which is the information we were interested in, still returned true regardless. So yes, your understanding of that, of why that was happening, is correct. Okay, so good. At least we got this far. So we're in position to fix this up tomorrow. There is a couple of bugs, like for example here, right? We have to say if player, we get to use our new syntax now. Then we do this line of code, and if. So there's that. See how much easier that is, rather than writing if is friendly, then e.toPlayer, right? Like, this is a lot easier. And then this is all good. So 2 notes. Let me just write them down in our to-do. So it's always good to have a to-do, so that when you come back the next day, you know where you left off. So, check block slowdown effect for monster. Monster visual effect for block. Not working. Everything else should be good. We get to call it here. Good time to commit as well. Implemented full dot property reading as an option for data files, which is a very nice feature actually. I do like that. We're up to release build 13295. And did we do anything else really? I think that was it. So that was the majority of today's coding session, making good progress. Much better. All right. So I'm happy with that. We kind of got the best of both worlds. We got the ability to use dots, and we still get the ability to have the proper config properties just drilled down correctly. So with a little bit of finagling with how the data file parsing occurs, we're able to make both possible. Great. So that's gonna be it for today's coding session. It's been fun chatting with y'all. For those of you that tuned in today, thank you for watching, and we'll be back tomorrow to do more coding. Yay! Till next time. Bye.